Genuine conversations with unique minds on the threats, the complexity, and the geopolitics shaping our world. This is the Entropy Podcast with Francis Gorman. Hi everyone, welcome to the Entropy Podcast. I'm your host Francis Gorman. Before we dive in, if today's conversation challenges you, sparks a new idea, or sharpens how you think about the world, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who enjoys staying curious. Today I'm joined by Stefan Pagels Christensen, the founder of Improv Communication, a leadership and team development consultancy based just north of Copenhagen. Stefan's career started at age 11 when he became a child star with lead roles in several feature films. Later, he was educated in improvisation from the world-renowned I.O. Chicago. And today, he uses expertise in applied improv, emotional intelligence, psychological safety, and neuroscience to help leaders and teams work together differently. Stefan is open about the things that shaped how he thinks, getting sober, living with ADHD, and learning how to treat failure as something you recover from rather than hide. Stefan, it's lovely to have you here with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Francis. Wow. Also, sounds crazy, huh?
It sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Well, Stefan, I think for the listeners, I should probably frame this conversation as something slightly different to the deep technology dives we've done in the past and far more human-centric, but also really important for people in leadership roles or people who have a level of authority within their business or entrepreneurship to fully understand who they are, and that sometimes when you go up, you come down, but there is a path forward. And in that path, you discover things about yourself that you never knew before. And I want to ask you, Stefan, you started your career unusually early. You became a child actor at 11. When you look back now, what did that world teach you about attention, pressure, and performance?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in my later years, I've realized it taught me a lot. Back then, I probably wasn't really aware of what it did. I think so. At my first, so I started with radio at 11, and then my first movie when I was 12 years old as a lead actor in a big children movie here in Denmark, and which meant that very, very early on, I was put into a grown-up working environment. And basically what happens when you're working on a movie is that there's allocated a big budget, and there's a lot of people that are working very focused on that project for a specific period of time, which pretty much very much uh, is similar to what happens out there in the corporate world, right? So at a very early age, I was brought into large $1 million projects and had to figure out how to adapt, how to fit in, and how to make things work with different people in different roles and different responsibilities. And for me back then, it was just all a game, right? It was playing. I had fun. I enjoyed doing it. I was naturally curious. I was naturally excited. It was like this whole new world. And also being the lead actor, pretty much everyone had to count on me performing well, which means that I was probably treated better than someone being in a position as a runner. Because if I didn't perform well, then the movie would not succeed, right? So I think it taught me a lot about that. But I think it's actually first later in my life when I started reflecting back on it that I realized how much I actually learned from it.
And when you look back, Stefan, I know a lot of kids in this age group, and I was a kid myself once upon a time, if you can believe it or not, that was full of energy and easily distracted. You said you've ADHD. Like when you go into a professional environment that is such intensity, that is on a budget, and I should say I worked in the film industry for years before I moved into security, so I'm very familiar with the pressures of that world. As a child, did that shape how you behaved?
I think it definitely did. I think it also helped keep my ADHD in check. So one of the common, I think, symptoms, or what you might say, of ADHD is that you can put a lot of attention into something for a short period of time, and then it becomes not interesting anymore, and you put all your focus into something else. So a good signal out there, if you have like 20 started but not finished projects, it's a pretty good sign that you might be having some sort of a diagnosis. It could be ADHD. I'm not a psychiatrist. So I think like for me, uh, that was, it was super exciting. It was for a short period of time, 3 months, full focus on that. I was taken out of school. Um, and probably it's in that sense, it have shaped me maybe more negative than positive, because that was like, I was rewarded for it immediately. It was exciting. And then it's ended. And then was like a 1 year wait until the people who actually edited and it was cutting and doing the sound of all the like post production, and then it restarted. I'm not sure if that answered your question. Uh,
It did. It
yeah,
gives me a lot of insights into
yeah,
the process that you go through.
yeah.
The one thing I want to ask you, and this is probably a bit personal. Did you feel the need that you became a provider for your family at that point? You were earning big. You were renowned. You were well known. I presume you were making a lot of money at the time. Did you feel a responsibility to enable a certain lifestyle?
Uh, no, I think that's like it wasn't that well paid. So, like, first of all, Denmark is a small country, right? We have 6 million people, so it's not like a Macaulay Culkin. I don't know how much they're getting or work paid for what they did. I think um, I can tell you one story. So I'm brought up by a pretty above average, I would say, family. So I've always been privileged in that sense. Um, One thing that did happen though was that when I entered my first movie, I had maxed out my tax deduction bar. I don't know what it's called in English, right? But, as a kid, you can earn X amount of money without paying tax, and of course, I had surpassed that. Uh, and then I came back to school, and all my classmates had started like doing like after school work, spare time jobs, working at the local supermarket or handing out newspapers or like whatever it was that people did back then. And so I would after school I'd be like, oh, so you want to hang out? And like, no, we have to work. And I was like, oh well, like I don't have a job. So I went home to my dad and I said, oh, like I want a job at the supermarket. And he said, okay, why? I said, well, I have nothing else to do. All my friends are working after class or after school. So I I want to have a job as well, because being drawn out of school for 3.5 months in that age period and then put back in, like, I think there's, even though it's only 3.5 months, a lot of things happens with kids in that age, right? So I felt like I needed that. And he said, well, you can go down and ask for a job, apply for a job. And I went down and I asked store managers, like, hey, I want a job here. My friend Jesper and Søren works here. It's like, oh, no problem. Go ask at the butcher's department. I said, okay, no problem. I'll walk out there. And I said, hello, butcher department. Um, I'm looking for a job. And said, okay, no problem. What's your name? I'm Stefan. Oh, nice to meet. This was before my movie was public, right? So no one knew who I was back then. And then he said, oh, yeah, well, you can start tomorrow. I said, no problem. I'll come tomorrow. And I showed up and he put me in this white, like, uh, coat, and he gave me a hose and said, oh, your job will be to like clean down the butchery. And I said, no, no problem. I'll do that. And I would be like, uh, uh, hosing down the walls, and I would like clean up meat pieces, your blood and everything. I would clean up the entire butchery. That was fun. And I did that for 2 days. And then my, this is such a stupid story. Then I came home and then my dad said, oh, Stephen, I think it's time for you that you learn something about the tax system. And he said, so you've just made a movie and you enjoyed doing that. It was fun. um, that paid, let's say, $400 per day. And you worked and you had fun. Now you have, let's say, I don't know, $50,000 tax deduction. I don't know, it wasn't that much, but let's say $5,000 tax deduction. After that, you'll have to pay tax, and you've surpassed that. Um, And now uh, you work at the butcher at the grocery store, and they pay you $6 an hour. But because you've surpassed that, you're now paying tax. So actually, you're only getting $3 an hour. So you've now been working down there for 4 hours for 2 days. That's $24, and this is what you make uh, earn making movies. So, and I understood that differently, which was bad for me back then because it kind of put a thought in my head that I was worth more than normal people. Sounds terrible to say, but of course, like as a kid, like that wasn't fun hosing down blood from the wall. I was like compared to being a center of a set where everyone gives you like catering and food and everyone is giving you makeup and making sure like so so I think for me I was like that makes no sense that I'm gonna waste my time down there when I'm not getting paid for it. So I actually went down I think the day after and I quit my job. uh, so what it did tell me was that in this world we're being paid for one thing and that is the time we have, and that based on your expertise that amount of money can either go up or go down, or you might have a very high expertise as an actor, but if you're hosing down blood from the wall as a butcher, it is not uh, being honored, or it doesn't matter for that type of job. So yeah, I think that that's what it taught me about it. I think in terms of, I've never had to provide for my family. I think it's rather the other way around as I progressed later into my maybe more darker side of my career.
As really powerful imagery there when you look at that, and I suppose it brings the question of self-worth and how
Mm.
do you value your skill set. And I think we'll get to that a little bit further on, but because you mentioned it up, so you kind of went from this relatively unknown kid to this highly recognizable child, I assume, across Denmark. Anywhere you went, I'm assuming people went, Stefan, is
Yeah.
that you? How did that change your reality?
So that was actually the worst part of that life I had, so to speak. So first of all, my first movie came out in 2000. This was before social media. Back then, there was maybe 2 or 3 kids movies premiering in the cinemas every year, and it was the same 4, 5, 6 children actors who was in those because it was a big investment, and the production companies would rather you know if so I actually want back for myself. One of the things when before I got the part in the first movie Miracle it's called, there was a big conversation going on between the production company and the director whether they would take their chances with me because it was I wasn't an experienced actor, and it was me and a colleague of mine. It would either be him who got the lead and then someone else who got the supporting lead role, or it would be me who got the lead and he would get the supporting lead role. And I remember that was like for me, uh, like a bit of an exciting and uncertain time, and eventually I got it, so that was fine. Then when the movie came out, this was something which all kids and their parents went to watch. So um, that made me probably one of the most famous faces in Denmark. And Copenhagen is not that big. We're a little more than 1 million people living there, which meant that if I went for a walk at the city center, or I took the public transport or whatever it is, people would like recognize me. And that was a surreal experience, so to speak. For me, it was first of all because I was genuinely very approachable and open to others, and I've never been afraid to like approach others and talk to them. But people were genuinely afraid of approaching me because they looked at me as, oh, this is the guy from the movies, and you are not. Like now, here you are in front of me, and this is crazy. So it would be more like people would be like pulling their parents and be like, "Mom, Dad, look, it's and I didn't understand it, uh, and I was also like I started questioning myself like why not they're not coming over and talk to me? Like I can see you, and I know that you've seen me, and I'm fully okay with talking to you. And I think that's part of also like started a little bit of anxiety in myself because uh, I don't know how it is today. Luckily, or whatever you say, I'm not on Instagram with 100,000 followers or something like that. Um, so so few people recognize me still, but it's not like it's so long time ago it happened. Um, but I think back then there were fewer famous faces or known faces, familiar faces, what you want to call it. And today, like there's so many. There's multiple kids TV shows. There's multiple YouTube channels. Parents who have kids with hundreds of thousands of followers that are funny. So I think maybe now it's not that special anymore. I don't know because for me, I don't think about it if I see someone. So back then, that was for me. Yeah, it was a difficult. That was the difficult part of like realizing that people looked at you and thought you were special, or maybe made assumptions about you based on what they'd known.
Makes you very self-aware
Mhm.
as a child, essentially, still developing, still trying to understand who you really are, and you've got this identity. You've already looked at your self-worth and made some calculations there as a kid around who am I, who do I want to be, what's my value, etc. And your career progressed then, Stefan, and you became even more recognizable as the more films and more TV work and more media that you took part in. But then a spiral came, and addiction came. Can you talk to me about what happened there, and how did you, I suppose, lose control of the situation?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I can tell you that there's one I call her Mor Helle, Mother Helle. Helle was doing the costumes at my first movie, and when that ended, she said to me, Stephen, just so you know, when this ends in a couple of weeks, like you might feel that there's like a big black hole in your stomach or emptiness in your stomach, and that's completely fine. And then you just call me, okay? And I was like, what is she talking about? um, but that happened, that's for sure. The thing is that as a child star or child actor, um, you are doing maybe one movie a year, two if you're lucky, which I also did at some point. Um, but the film crew, they're doing one movie, children movie, and then they're doing a comedy movie, then they're doing a horror movie, then they're doing a drama movie. So, and then they move from this 3 month production to the next, where there's some other stars who needs to shine, like the ones in front of camera, and they put all the energy and focus on that. And that's what she actually meant about it. So that's when I first like started to feel this. Uh, um, and also I think it had to do with like having the ADHD. Um, so very quickly, I think I remember the first time I smoked a joint, I felt like, oh, this kind of put like a buff on me and uh, relax. And then it became like self, what do you call it? Self enhancing. Like it just like grew and grew. And of course, eventually, yeah, I ended out on a sidetrack.
And I'm interested about the ADHD and the link to the addiction aspects. I often find this. I think my wife often tells me I'm on the spectrum anyway. I've never got diagnosed, so I don't know if that's true or not.
No?
But I do see it, especially with security professionals. They, the curiosity to kind of crack something, and then okay, you figure that next thing. Let's move on to the next thing, or to do something but overdo it. So like, open a bottle of wine. Well, finish the bottle of wine. Will I open another one? Maybe not. I've wife and kids, so keeps you grounded, keeps you anchored. I'll start a podcast. Okay, will I do it once a month? No, I'll do it once a week, and I'll record three of them just because I haven't got enough on. So I think there is that. I don't know what it is, but there's probably something a little bit of fey or different that drives the mindset to not just do something at a level that people consider normal, but to go into hyperdrive, to overdo it, to extend or push past what the limits are, and that ultimately lands in a crash of some sort, burnout. You're exhausted. You overthink, you can't sleep properly because you're thinking of the next thing, etc. is that all linked back to kind of how you experience this, and then your coping mechanisms? I presume you hit rock bottom, and you had to find a path back up again.
Yeah, good question. So first of all, like people's rock bottom is always different, right? So someone can be like, "Oh, I'm losing my job, and that's enough for me to change or do something." Others are, "I'm losing my home," and others are, unfortunately, or maybe I end up taking someone else's life and I'm put for jail for life because have an addictive personality, or I have an undiagnosed or untreated or unmedicated diagnosis, and also sometimes completely people with no diagnosis at all end up doing the same. So what is it? Is it the one or the other? I don't know. For me, I think uh, the to explain a little bit about like the brain in that sense. So I always try and explain it as like a closed circuit. So this is your brain, and it has like a closed circuit, and then it has three things that sensed up over here. They send it, and then they have three channels that receive it, and it's like this closed circuit, and it shoots like adrenaline, dopamine, and no, serotonin, dopamine, and noradrenaline. Right, those three things are needed for us to function and focus on a task or whatever. And a normal brain, so it would say like this: pew, 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 pew. And then if so it's the anticipation of the reward. So let's say that I'm about to get a raise or complete a task, or my wife will touch me on the thigh. Then it will like pew, 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 pew. It would go like from 1 to 10, and it would shoot these soldiers out in front of my head. And then it will be received by the others here or captured, and then they will go and charge back up and be ready to shut out. And one of the things with drugs is if you take cocaine, for instance, that is putting, as far as I remember, it's putting blockers on the receiving part of things. So it will shoot up, pew, and it will go, and oh wait, I can't go there. It will bounce back, forth, back and forth, and in that sense, you will have like you'll feel super happy, super excited, super focused, and whatever. And then at some point it deteriorates, and all the soldiers are picked up in the receiving part, and they charge up and go back to be shot. And as far as I know, we all have an equal amount of soldiers in our system. So the problem is a normal brain will have like from 1 to 10, and it will regulate itself. And the way I try to explain it is an ADHD brain will have like either pew, pew, or so from either 1 or 15. So that means that I learned early on that if I did things, played around with things, were bouncing, were like fiddling with stuff, like that is like the anticipation of the kinesthetical reward, for instance, that would like release these soldiers into my head. Now, when you get medicated for it, that's basically just like a micro dosing of stuff that like slowly releases these in a calm pace so that you can actually sit down. And as far as I believe, we all are. Again, I'm not a scientist or researcher on it, so this is from what I've made up from my own studies and like from my own readings on it. Like we need to have these to function. so uh, so let's imagine this happens, and that means for you, what you're referring to, as far as I'm hearing it, is like this constant urge to like do things and then overdo it. Like I'm not just going to start one podcast. One podcast gives you like this, but I'm going to actually start three. And that's what I refer to as the gun to the head mentality. We call it that among my ADHD friends, which means that if I have nothing, if I have no responsibilities, if I don't have kids now, my wife is pregnant, so we'll get one in November. And one of the things I'm looking very much forward to is that if that will make me able to like really get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, because I also have my work to take care of, and I also want to be a good dad. So this like gun to the head mentality is something like where you have to do it, and that will turn you on to like the 15, so you will get stuff done. And of course, that leads to the burnout, because if we all have a finite amount of soldiers in our system, and we shoot them all, fire them all at 15, and they're picked up, then they don't get to recharge. And that's why you'll see these like peak periods where you have hyper focus, it's referred to in ADHD, and then you'll have like a complete crash. And for me, that showed out as I would be able to get stuff done at an extreme, uh, um, uh, with an extreme output. I could literally work for 10, and then I would be unable to get even out of bed for maybe a month until the money ran out, and now I would lose my job, or I would lose my big client, or like, so these things were before I was treated or medicated for ADHD. That would be like the behavioral pattern that I had. So what you're talking like, oh, so talking about being an addictive personality, the thing is that everything that is a, a substance, or a stimulating substance will increase that level of dopamine. So drinking a bottle of wine is good. And if you wouldn't have had any kids, like, oh, it's gone all of a sudden. Uh, what is keeping you from opening the second is that I need to get my kids out of bed tomorrow. But what if they weren't there? Would you have then gone for the second, or maybe the third? And then would you have then been able to do the podcast? No, because you wouldn't have cared. And then that is like the negative spiral that happens. So uh, having people around you is genuinely a very good support system for not letting it spin out of play.
That's fascinating, Stefan.
Mm.
Really insightful indeed. Also, getting up at 5 in the morning won't be a problem because you'd be up at 1, 2, 3, 4:30, 5. Probably going back to bed at 5 might be feasible for a while when that new baby comes. So, yeah, get some sleep would be my advice there.
I heard it. People have already warned me, and that's completely fine. I've been looking forward to this.
Stefan, so we've kind of gone through the arc. You're started as a child. You're fall into addiction. Talking about the patterns with ADHD that can kind of influence that, and the support structure that helps keep people grounded. Let's talk about the rebirth and improv. How
Yeah,
did you find improv, or how did improv find you, and how are you now helping leaders be better versions of themselves?
yeah. Thank you. Yes. So first off, this is in 2009. I think I was probably at my lowest, if not very near my lowest there. Um, I didn't have a job. I bought an apartment before the financial crisis. The crack came. Uh, the money in the movie industry was flipped upside down. Before people would negotiate about doing a commercial, and I would set the terms, and now they would be like calling saying like, "There's a commercial. They want to audition you, but first we'll pay you 10 grand." I'm like, "Oh, but I need the money." So that kind of changed the entire ecosystem there. So I was broke, and I was invited to this improv class, and that was the first time I took improv or even acting training. It's in the 9 years that I've been doing a lot of different things, um, and we met every 2 weeks, a group of 30, 35 Danish actors, and eventually in 2011, we were told that we had been funded to do an improvised feature film, and we did this. And I kind of like picked up on the improv thing. I was still a known face, and one of the other uh, 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 boys, guys, kid, child actors that was in that group of people. He and I, we started like going out and doing stuff for schools. Um, and that worked very well. And in 2013, I was encouraged to go to Chicago to take an education at the IO Theater for in improv. So they have this like 8 week or 6 week summer intensive where you cover like a year and a half program. And I went, and that was great. Uh, so first of all, what I experienced there was like mind blowing, completely mind blowing. I was super. I fell off my chair when I watched the first live show. a group of 8 people. They got one word as a suggestion from the audience, and they created a magical 35 completely organic comedy act where everything seemed as if it was overly rehearsed and written, and it was made up in the moment. And I looked and I was like, "Wow, this is magic." I had no clue that it existed and what it was that I was going to do. Um, I only thought that what was referred to as like short form, so shorter sketch, whose line is it anyway, um, a type of improvisation, and that's what I thought it was. So this was magical. Um, and I went over there, and the learning that I took away from it was that I went over and people asked who I was. And I was like, well, I'm an actor from Copenhagen, Denmark. And they said, oh, nice. Denmark, is that the capital of Germany? And so this is not to talk bad about the Americans, but like over there, there were people who had never left the state, right? Because America is so big. And that made where I came from, everywhere I went, people would just open the door for me, right? They would recognize me, and I would have an entry into almost anything. And I kind of like took that for granted. So I had a lot of self confidence, and still I was also drinking, smoking weed, and doing drugs. So I was also not had didn't have that big or high self esteem. Um, uh, but there, no one knew who I was, and no one frankly cared. And I think that was a very healthy experience for me because, first of all, I got to start uh, on a fresh from scratch and start over. And I was being also measured or rewarded or evaluated based on um, the actions which I did. And I actually just reflected about this for a while. And I think one of my biggest like epiphanies or like aha wow moments were when so this is a week and a half into training. Met a group of 20 people from all over the world. We're in this together, and we are we're in class. There's a lunch break, so I had been cashing out a week's worth of cash, alumni, yeah, uh, pocket money because I was broke. So my parents and family helped me finance this. So I'd cashed out this. I had my credit card, my passport, like all my like identification papers and everything in my wallet. And in the lunch break, I lose my wallet. Either it's been stolen, pickpocketed. I just dropped it because I was not careful. I have ADHD, right? Something happened, and I freak out. I panic. I'm all alone. And I'm the only Dane in a huge country for the first time in my life. I have no money. I have no ID. I've heard that the police is dangerous, and I've you know met the police before back in my own country. Like I was shit scared, to be honest. And then uh, so I was freaking out. I was scared. I was nervous. I'm like, what's happening? And actually, at some point, my classmates, of course, they like helped and like tried to, find it, and we couldn't recover it. And then at some point, one of them just like made a statement out to the group and said, like, he took off his cap and he threw it on the floor, and he said, "Everyone, please chip in what you have, so we can help Stefan here." And then this group of strangers that I had known for a week and a half, poor students, some who had been like saving up an entire year just to be able to go to this class. Like it's not a cheap training, right? They would just take up whatever dollars they had in their pocket and like put it in that hat, and it was, you know, like a huge experience for me. First of all, I felt so humiliated. I felt so embarrassed. I felt so insecure. I also felt so full of love, so seen, so valued, you know, so respected, and so thankful that people would want to do that for me because they couldn't care who I was. Um, and I think, and I was like, there, I was crying, and I was like, my instinct was like, you're gonna get it back. Like I will pay everything back to you. But that was not the part. The part was that here we are, someone is in a situation when not everything is good. And we as human beings are actually willing to go afar, go quite far for others. to make others feel safe and feel good. And I think that was when it started like to change for me in terms of like realizing that for weeks I felt terrible. I felt so in debt to them, and I'm not sure that that changed anything in terms of how I behaved, or I wasn't like superficial, like but it changed the status where I went from. In Denmark, I was like high status, maybe famous, but here I was like, uh, I had to like live up to my best, and I think that taught me so much about myself um, as a human being, and it was also the beginning of me getting sober. Took a year and a half from there, but that was like I think that was actually my bottom.
You know, even when you're reliving that, I can feel the emotion in your voice. Like it's still very raw for you. So it obviously had a profound impact
For sure. Yeah.
on everything you do today. So let's fast forward. We're in the present day. You're no longer have an addiction. You're standing on stages, talking to people at conferences, and you have your 5 guiding principles. Do you want to spell them out for me, Stefan, and talk about what it is you do for those of us in leadership positions or positions of authority that we really need to hear now?
Yeah, sure. And if I can just like backtrack just for a second, because so when I ended in 2013 at IO, sorry. Um, so yeah, so when I ended my time in 2013 at IO, I went back to Denmark and I started like teaching improv, and people who were in the entertainment industry, they were like super excited for me getting back, like, oh, we want to learn this. And I went to page one and I said, okay, great. Now we'll all stand in a circle and we will clap and say sip, sap, sup. And they just said, no, 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 no. Like we've done this. We are actors. We're comedians. Like we want this thing, like the end product. And I was like a little bit, well, friends, listen, like there must be a reason why this is the way they started there. And I had no clue what I was doing. So I actually reached out to the owner of the theater, Shana Halban, and said, uh, Shana, you need to bring your people over here to Denmark. And she said, yeah, okay, no problem. And I had uh, my assumption was that like everyone in Denmark wanted to be part of this training for a full week, and there was room for 60 people, and 12 people from Denmark signed up. And I thought, what's going on? Like they don't get it. And luckily, 48 people from the rest of the world decided to like fly to Copenhagen, book a hotel, pay for an expensive course for a full week to actually train with these people. So we had a huge group of people, and we made I'm like, let's make a festival. And we made a festival, and like, no problem. I rented 3 stages. I called the Danish morning television. I said, we're doing a festival. I have no clue what I'm doing. And I was still not clean and sober at that point. Um, so very ADHD frantic, right? As you say, not one podcast, not one stage, no, 3 stages, big things. Well, wow, how can it cannot? Why can it ever go wrong? And it didn't. It was great, and we managed to succeed. And because of that festival, I was there was one of the teachers there, Lindsay Haley, an amazing improviser. She said, "I'm gonna connect you with Shana Halban because you might be the only one who can bring IO to Europe." And I said, "No problem." And I had prepared all my objections, all my like, I was really gonna sell myself for this meeting. Like I was so, nervous because this was my chance and everything else. And we log on a Skype call. It was back then, and I think it was my first Skype call ever, maybe. And then Shana said, "So I'm like, okay, ready to sell yourself." And then Shana says, oh, "Okay, so what do you want?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" So you're coming over here. What do you want? And my game plan completely changed. I'm like, "Well, I don't know." I was like, um, uh, I, uh, I want all my friends to be able to come over and take the course for free. I want to be educated as a teacher from the IO. I want to be able to work with the best trainers that there is. I want to be able to perform at this special show because, that brings status to it. And I want to like be able to position myself as the head of IO in Europe. And she was like, "Yeah, no problem." I said, "Oh, that was easy." Um, we went over. That was then the summer of 2014, and I went to LA, and I went on a trip to different theaters around in the States. And then I had planned to put up a European tour. So I created a European tour with her, and I managed from 14 to 16 to travel more than 60 cities all around the world with some of the world's best performers and teachers, and like learn from them and like really learn and learn. And then in 2016, we opened our own theater in Copenhagen because my ambition was to be the world's best improviser. I was so in love with the craft and I really wanted this. And we did almost exactly as they do at IO, stage and a training center, an improv school, and people could then sign up. The difference between us and IO is at IO, it's the people that go on Saturday Night Live who will be in like all comedy movies. They've like trained there, right? Mike Myers, Stephen Colbert, Steve Carell, Jimmy Fallon, like all of these, Amy Poehler, um, um, Tina Fey, like huge names have like either started there or trained there at some point. So people there would take these classes to become a super comedian or superstar at Hollywood. In Denmark, I was a sober alcoholic, or like maybe still like. So we did it in English, and the people who took those classes in 2016 when we opened, they were actually like we were quite successful quite early, and we had a lot of students who joined us. And I would talk about performance, scenes, characters, like how I'm being a great performer, a great improviser, and they would look at me with sheer fear and worry in their eyes and say, "Stop, stop, stop, Stephen! That's not why we're doing it." And I was like, why did you sign up for an improv class? Like, this is an improv comedy class. I'm like, oh, no, no, I work at Novo Nordisk, Ørsted, Coloplast, uh, at huge companies. And I'm a structural engineer, or I'm a scientist, or I have a PhD or a doctorate degree in XYZ. I have a high academic background and a highly paid job. And I'm doing this paying out of my own pocket because I learned that in order for me to climb the corporate ladder, in order for me to become a better leader, a better colleague, become more creative, I had to work on these human skills. And that was the first time I was like, oh, wait a minute. There's something here which I probably didn't realize. Also, that was at the same time. So in 2014, in November, I became sober. So I had been working with myself in the 12 step program to kind of like uh, reinvent myself, or like look, take a look inside myself, clean up all my skeletons in the closet, do my 9th step, do my 4th, 5th step, write my self evaluation. I'm not sure what it's called in English, like a self assessment, like all these reflection things. Um, so I also maybe started like teaching more from a like relationship based perspective. And that's when it then started. So how did I then become a corporate trainer? Well, because 12 weeks in our theater's opening time, our students, they approached me and said, my boss have noticed I've become much more engaged at work, much more confident, much more outspoken, and pulled me at the side the other day and asked, like, what's wrong with you? Like, what happened? Um, and the only thing I could say was I started this improv class. And I said, wow, that's amazing. Yeah, now my boss wants you to come work with our team. Can you do that? It's like, yeah, no problem. Like, of course, as when you have ADHD, you're not afraid of failing. You failed so much your entire life. You've made mistakes. You've been told you're wrong. You've been told to sit still. You've been told to be quiet. You've been told not to do stuff. So you are like, what could possibly go wrong? Like, yeah, well, there's a lot of people that don't like me anyway, and there's a lot of people who do like me, and then there's a lot of people who have never met me, and maybe they will like me, maybe they'll not. I don't know. So this whole thing, I think, just made me say yes. Maybe that's also the 5 principles, right? Principle 1 is say yes and. So I said it, and I did it. So yeah, that was just going back a little bit. Sorry about that. Um, what are the 5 principles? So the things that we teach in improv, what makes a good improviser, basically means that I can travel anywhere in the world and I can meet with someone who I've never met before, who I've never shared a stage with before. And if you're at a decent level improv experience, you will be able to get up in front of an audience, receive a word or no word at all from that audience, and then you would be able to entertain them, and they would feel entertained. They wouldn't feel cringed, uncomfortable, embarrassed, or offended as an audience member. They would genuinely feel like, wow, they must have known each other for years. And those 5 principles are varying based on different schools, different like branches of improv, or what you might call it. But the one that we use in improv communication and I've like translated into our corporate work is that the first one is always treat others with a yes and mentality. That means that when someone approaches you, your default response will always be from a yes but mentality. A yes but mentality means that someone approaches you, that means they're disturbing you in the moment that you're in, and your default response will always be rejecting, negative. And then the word but is also designed to like look for what's wrong in the suggestion. So always someone says something to you, listen to everything they say, make sure that you fully understand it, and then ask yourself, how might I build on this? How can I support this? How can I say yes and? It doesn't mean we should say yes and to everything, for sure not. The second one is no judgment of yourself. So everyone has been in a meeting, and this is like universal. Like we constantly judge ourselves. Uh, Everyone has sat in a meeting and said, "Should I say that? Oh, it's probably that's a stupid question." Or you've probably, if you've been on a stage or been at a conference lately, and after a talk, there's 400 people in the room, and someone has given a brilliant keynote, and then it's like, oh, now it's time for questions, and no one raises a hand. It's like it can't be in this world that out of these 400 people that we have no questions to ask. But it comes from self-judgment. It comes from the fear of speaking up, the fear of saying something stupid, and it's that inner voice that says, "Well, it's probably not important. You shouldn't do that. The others are much better than you." So we need to overcome that as improvisers, and we are much more likely to succeed working in a team if we overcome that as professionals working in the corporate world or leaders. The second one is a contradiction to that. That means that once we know that about ourselves, we must never judge others. Like, because every time someone speaks up and someone says something, they've already overcome their own fear, and we should applaud that. We should always assume positive intent, assume that they're doing this because they genuinely want to contribute. And we've all been in meetings, we've all been in situations at work where we are thinking, oh, yep, now it's Francis who's saying this again. Yep, that's here we go again, right? Why do we do that? Why do we want to be that kind of people? The fourth one is that we should embrace mistakes. So on stage, when we are improvising, we're working without a script. We're doomed to fail. Like it's, I think, I believe it's scientifically proven that to the brain, getting up on stage without a script, like to improvise in front of a paying audience, it is the same danger signals as jumping out of a plane or going to war. Right? The brain can't differentiate. The same danger signals are triggered inside our brain. So uh, of course, we will make mistakes. And in improv, we try to turn those into gifts. That's one of our ways of doing it. So if someone says something which was unintended, instead of calling it out and making fun of the person on stage, because the audience will obviously know it. A good example is I said at one point, don't step in my wound. So, you can rub salt in the wound or you can step on someone that's lying down. Right? That's 2 phrases of talking bad about someone. And I mixed them up on stage. And my scene partner, he then took that and doubled down on that and said, oh, step on your wound. Oof, that sounds bad, right? I know about rubbing salt in it, but step in it? Yep, that's what I'm like. So he like doubled down on it, and the audience were laughing from here until the end. He could have frozen. I'm like, oh, Stefan made a mistake. Do I address it? Do I not address it? And now everyone in the audience would have been like, oh, someone made. Instead, he made that the thing of the entire show. So that's one of the mentalities of embracing mistakes. And let's be honest, success lies somewhere in between doing nothing and failing, right? We got to be willing to push ourselves towards that. You don't have this podcast by being afraid of failing. Like starting a podcast, you're doomed to fail. You're doomed to not have followers. You're doomed to say stupid things in in the radio, right? Yeah. So, and then the fifth one is kind of tying back to that experience that I had at that class where I lost my wallet in 2013, which is that my job is to make others look good. That the sum of uh, 1 plus 1 is, 1 plus 1 is 11. There's many things of saying like I genuinely go on stage when I perform, and my ambition is not that I want to be the star of the show. My ambition is that everything that someone says to me, I will make that important. I will give that meaning. I will validate it. I will add to it. And that means that I'm trying to constantly gift my scene partners or my colleagues with whatever reward. Um,
There's a
the
lot
thing,
in there, Stefan,
yeah,
on those ones. I want to just kind of
mm,
unpack some of this
yeah,
first, because I've been listening and I've gone, wow. So at the start, I was looking at these principles. How do they resonate with me? Do they make sense? But you've brought them to life, and as you were talking, I do a lot of on stage speaking on different subjects, and the same thing always happens. It's a sweaty room. There's lights beaming on top of you. You're looking out. You can't actually see who's looking back at you, but there's 50, 100, 500 people in a room. You can feel their eyes on you, but you can't necessarily make out the faces. There's normally a big LED clock sitting in front of you that has a timer that says 40 minutes or 50 minutes or whatever.
mhm,
You're kind of thinking, I need to go to the bathroom. There's sweat running down my back. I feel uneasy. And then the questions come. And in most cases, you don't know what the questions are going to be. And you have to think on the fly. You have to deal with all of these factors that are in your environment. You have to consider the other speakers if you're on a panel. Well, he's just said something stupid. Do I call him out? Do I, do I step it back? How does it work? And the examples you've given there, especially the one that really resonates with me, is okay, you've put all this energy out to the room. You've killed it. No questions. And you're always wondering, goes, surely there's a question, or someone
mhm,
asks you a question, you go, oh, not this question again. But what you have said there, you've gone, actually, those people are looking back going, this person is very knowledgeable, or they've said all of these things. I can't possibly ask this thing that's in my mind. And you've made it real. You've actually, by breaking those examples out, you've made it so real for people. And I think when you break it down to smaller teams, and myself in a leadership position, even just having this conversation and thinking of the realities in the rooms, especially now that we're all on Teams calls, and there's not as much point to point meets or person to person meets, this becomes even more valuable, or almost a necessity to do the checklist before you commit to the conversation.
mm, yeah. Yeah, no, and I think that's very well done. I think what you just explained there is like, one part of the things, right? Which is um, that's the self judgment, right? When you're on stage, when you are giving a presentation, like our brain is to some extent, I think, designed to just keep us alive, and being up in front of 500 people is a threatening uh, scenario for our brain, and that means that we will have some sort of a survival instinct. And people talk, well, maybe it's the amygdala, whatever it is, and I definitely think it starts with coming in through our eyes. Um, so that we will look at people, and there might be someone who is frowning their brown a little bit, or having a close body language, or maybe not paying attention. And all of these are inputs for you, which you have to channel through a filter and tell it like, oh, is that it? And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles of like giving presentations or being in a meeting, is like we have that obligation that when someone uh, presents something, or when we have an online meeting, that we have our camera on and that we are giving them attention. We are, first of all, we're incapable of multitasking, and we present this to participants in our training as one of the first exercises they go through, we make them do things together, and they fail badly. And this is not difficult. Like, it's a very simple exercise, but they fail badly. And I say, great, what happened here? And it's like, oh, we were multitasking. I'm like, thank you so much. You are unable to do that. You're incapable of multitasking. Yet we still will be in a Teams call while answering emails, right? Or many of us, we drive while we text. And the thing is, we might succeed with it, but we are significantly increasing the chances of error. And in a Teams call, while we're writing an email, well, we might send the wrong mail inviting our boss and not our best friend to the Friday dinner, but or not attaching, forgetting to attach something, or like sending the wrong numbers to the wrong person. Yep, that's fine. When we're driving the car, it's fatal. Like, we might kill someone, or we might crash our car, or whatever it is, or take someone else. Hopefully, it's the latter. So, so our brain is incapable of multitasking, and all these inputs that we're getting is we need to be able to like differentiate, and we need to be able to like understand them, so that we can take these danger signals away. So I was I sidetracked here, the ADHD speaking, right? So the same goes when we're on stage giving a presentation. When all these inputs, they are telling us data that what we're talking about is not important, that they're not paying attention, that you don't matter, that you will get fired, like all these threat signals. Our brain is telling those. The same goes in an online meeting. If we're in a Teams call with 5 people in it, and I'm giving my presentation, or I'm the one talking, and everyone is like looking down, or typing an email, like, I'm being told, not verbally, but like visually, through the input of my eyes, that I'm not important, that I'm not worthy, that I'm like, people couldn't care less about me. And it's something that's always, when we get to that, when people have experienced, and we then tie that to that learning, like, people, they're like, oh my, like, whoa, I've been part of that culture. Um, and I'm guilty as charged as well. So like, none of us are perfect. Like, part of it is like continuing to try and improve on how you behave, and accepting when you're not, right? I came just 2 hours ago from a meeting, and something happened. We didn't have time to prepare it. We go straight into the meeting, my partner and I, uh, and I'm like steamrolling this meeting. And afterwards, I'm like, oh, whoa, what happened there? I said, oh, we weren't prepared well enough. Why were, oh, like, we asked these questions and say, okay, we failed. The thing is, we talk about it. And yeah, those conversations can be uh, filled with like loud voices or shouting, but it's never in a hostile environment, because we've been to war together. Like, and our brains, like, we've experienced these things together. So it comes from a level of very, very deep trust and willingness to want each other to look good. And that means that we're actually pointing out the so there's the people conflict and the task conflict, right? We're addressing the task conflict, and that can be feisty, but it builds on this foundation of psychological safety.
You're basically teaching people to find signals in a sea of noise, which is what we're surrounded by, with all of these distractions in the modern world, which is a really great thing, Stefan. Before we finish up, is there any message that you want leaders, entrepreneurs, business persons to take away from this conversation today?
Oh, yeah. So many. I don't even didn't even get started, no. I think first of all, um uh, one of the things we say is that you didn't learn to swim by reading about it in a book, right? So it is being willing to put yourself out there, experiment, learn and fail, and be vulnerable about it. Explain to others um, what you can and want to do differently, and saying that this is part of my process. I think that's the first part of things, and then I think we genuinely want to belong as people. And in the world that we're currently living in, like there's a lot of like people are trying to separate us. There's a lot of like I'm this or I'm that or what not. Um, and in the end, we all sleep, we all eat, and we all shit. And I think that's like we're all human beings, right? And I've experienced from working with more than 20,000 leaders in global organizations in Europe that everyone has the exact same response to the training that we do. And we all improvise every single day. None of what we're doing is scripted. We're not living. I don't believe we're living as in a simulation. I genuinely believe that we wake up in the morning, and what drives us is our purpose, what we want to do, and who we want to be. And some of us might have forgotten that along the way because we've been pressured by environment, finances, geopolitics, whatever, to behave in a certain way. Um, and then I think it starts with you. Like everyone, we have a tendency to point fingers and like, oh, it's the leadership, or it's the marketing department, it's IT, it's whatever it is, like finance, it's legal. But like all change starts with you. So I weren't able to stop drinking before I genuinely accepted that I had a problem. And I think the same goes with leaders. It same goes with change management. Like when you are going through a transformation, digital or whatever it is, it starts with you. Are you willing to change? And are you willing to accept the fact that you might fail doing that? If if the answer to that is yes, then I think you've come a long way.
Stefan, that's a great way to finish off the podcast. It was my absolute pleasure having you on and to listen to your journey. It's inspirational to say the least. And I'll put the details of how people can find you in the episode description as well, so that they can look you up after the episode.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you very much. And it was a pleasure being able to tell a part of my story. Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.